Well, good morning. It is so nice to be back with you. It's been quite a while, and like yourself, I've been tucked away trying to stay healthy and safe. But I'm back again, and I'm going to be doing some programs on YouTube. Your activity directors will be able to either bring it to your room via computer, or perhaps you have a TV station at your residence where they'll be able to show it. So today's program is called Michigan Trivia. Um, all these questions are about our wonderful state, Michigan. Now, some of you may very well have grown up in the Lower Peninsula. Some of you may have grown up in the Upper Peninsula. You know, I love Michigan because people will say, where do you live? I can put my hand up and I can say, well, I live right over here along Lake Michigan. Or when I lived in the UP, I could put my other hand up and point to where I was located. But all the questions today are going to be about Michigan. Now, I have always told you where I got my information. I don't want you to think I just sit around and make things up. These are all different websites where I found this information. So I will be asking you questions. I'll pause for a moment so you'll have an opportunity to see if you know the answer, and then I will give you the answer. Our first one is the large island located in Lake Huron and is a hub for tourists in the summer. Lots of people go here. Lots of people go to ride horses, horse and buggies, or maybe to buy fudge. Mackinac Island. And of course, there's the famed Grand Hotel with its red roof and St. Anne's Church right there. This is another name for the Mackinac Bridge. Now, many of you may have remembered before 1959 when they built the bridge and you put your car on a ferry and you rode across the Straits of Mackinac, especially hunters at hunting season. And I've had people tell me it was a mighty long wait to get on those ferries. But another name for the Mackinac Bridge is the Big Mac or the Mighty Mac. This is the name of the big three automakers in Michigan. Of course, that's how Detroit got its start. And if you said Chrysler, General Motors, and Ford, you're correct. Now, this happens to be a Ford Mustang. And today, Chrysler has merged with Fiat, the sports car company. So they're called Chrysler Fiat. This is the name of the famous hotel in Michigan with the world's longest porch. And earlier when I showed you a picture of Mackinac Island, I actually showed you that hotel. And that hotel is the Grand Hotel. I remember as a child in the 50s and early 60s, you could actually go inside, walk down in the basement. They had all these pictures of politicians, movie stars, royalty from Europe. Today, believe it or not, you have to pay in order to walk into the Grand Hotel if you're not staying there. This is the name, the famous magician and escape artist who died while he was performing on Halloween night in the city of Detroit. Now, this man would put himself in shackles, he'd put himself in trunks and get thrown into a river. He also used to say, you could punch me and hurt me and nothing would hurt me. Unfortunately, he let someone punch him in the stomach several days before Halloween. Unbeknownst to this person, their appendix had ruptured. And therefore, in the midst of his magical trick, he was unable to escape and he died. And if you said Harry Houdini, you were correct. A replica of Leonardo da Vinci's horse stands in this location in Grand Rapids. In fact, I'll tell you this location, the property and the artwork have been donated by a man and his wife who started a very famous grocery store chain that we have here in West Michigan that's now spanning out in the Midwest. And that horse is at Meyer Gardens. And it's more than life size. The year that Michigan became a state. Believe it or not, Michigan has been a state since 1837. Michigan has two peninsulas. And of course, I kind of gave it away when I opened up this program. The Upper Peninsula right here, which is adjacent to the state of Wisconsin, and the Lower Peninsula. And of course, we touch Indiana and Ohio in the Lower Peninsula. How many Great Lakes surround Michigan? Now, you know we have 5 Great Lakes total, but how many touch the state of Michigan? And can you name them? Well, we have Lake Superior that is above the Upper Peninsula. We have Lake Michigan here on the western side. We have Lake Huron on the eastern side. And then we have Lake Erie, which touches the southeastern portion of Michigan. Name Michigan's very first industry. Long before lumbering, we had another industry. And believe it or not, it was the fur industry. French and English fur traders arrived here in Michigan, and they traded items made in Europe for furs that the Native Americans had trapped, because beaver felt top hats were the rage in Europe. Every well-dressed man wore a beaver felt top hat. And of course, how did they travel from one post to another? They traveled in these birch bark canoes. The 38th president of the United States originated from Michigan. He was born, in fact, in Grand Rapids. Can you name this 38th president? And I'm guessing you all can. Of course, Gerald Ford. Now, Jerry Ford was the Speaker of the House for the Republican Party in 1974. And what happened is Spiro Agnew, who'd been vice president, had stepped aside because he had been found guilty of some fraudulent tax evasion, etc. So there was no vice president. Nixon resigned because of Watergate. And therefore, according to the 25th Amendment, if there is no vice president to take the place of the president, the Speaker of the House becomes the president. So our own Gerald R. Ford became president of the United States. One of the first things he did was pardon Nixon, because he said our long nightmare needed to end. We needed to move forward. The word Michigan means large water or large lake. From what language does the word Michigan originate? Now you've got to think about who lived here before the French and the English came for the fur trade industry. And that was Native Americans. Now the Ottawa, the Potawatomi, and the Chippewa Indians, the people of the Three Fires, spoke the Ojibwe language. And so Michigan is an Ojibwe word. Name 2 rival college sports teams in Michigan. This is like the biggest football game of the year between these 2 college teams. It's Michigan and Michigan State. Now this is G. Mennen Williams, better known as Soapy Williams, who was governor. And he had the Paul Bunyan Trophy made so that when Michigan and Michigan State played football, the winner of that game would take the Paul Bunyan Trophy back to their college, where it would sit for the year until Michigan and Michigan State played again. Name the site of the first capital of the state of Michigan. Now, we know today our capital is in Lansing, Michigan, but that is not the site of our first capital. Detroit, believe it or not, was the first capital, because when countries, France and England, came to set up for trade posts, they actually built forts, high walls to protect themselves, usually along the water. Families lived there. There were churches and schools, etc. So that was the first capital when we became a state in 1837, in Detroit. Name our state animal. I will give you a hint. It's also the name for the University of Michigan sports teams. So if you said Wolverine, you're correct. And a wolverine kind of looks like a small brown bear. Name the first permanent settlement in Michigan. And I will tell you, it was not Detroit. I know that would be my first guess. But the first settlement, the first city in the state of Michigan was Sault Ste. Marie. This is Father Jacques Marquette, who came to Sault Ste. Marie in 1668. So that was the first permanent settlement we had in Michigan. How do ships travel from Lake Superior to Lake Huron? Because you know there's a landform there. So how do you get from one lake to another? Well, the Sioux Locks. What they did is they cut land out, and they made this tunnel, if you will, and a ship will pull in from Lake Superior. A gate closes completely, water lifts it up, then it opens up this gate that you see here in front of the ship, and the ship travels through the Sioux Locks to get from Lake Superior to Lake Huron, or Lake Huron to Lake Superior. Name the mountain range in the Western Upper Peninsula. Now, I can tell you, if you know, when we think of the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains, you're probably thinking we don't have any mountains in Michigan. Believe it or not, we do have a small mountain range in the Western UP, and it's called the Porcupine Mountains, or the Porkies. This is Lake of the Clouds right here. When you climb up to the top of the Porkies, is what you see. There are two state campgrounds there. One is for trailers with electricity and water hookup. One is more rugged for tent campers like myself and my husband and family. No running water, etc. But they're beautiful. And there's a drive called the Brockway Mountain Drive. And if you ever take the Brockway Mountain Drive in the fall, it is stunning with all the colored leaves. Name Michigan's state tree. Now I'm going to give you a hint because it is a pine tree. That's all I'll tell you. Believe it or not, it's the white pine. You know, we know a white pine because there are 5 needles on each little branch of a white pine tree. What industry made Grand Rapids famous? I will tell you that in 1876, the World's Fair was held in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the United States becoming a nation. And 4 companies from Grand Rapids came to the World's Fair to show people what they made. What were they making in Grand Rapids? Well, believe it or not, they were making furniture. This is a stereo-optic card from the Berkey Gay Furniture Company. Some of you, maybe Grandma had a stereo-optic. You looked through it, you put a 2-picture card inside, and what you saw was 1 picture. Berkey Gay was one of the 4 companies that went to the World's Fair. They showed off the furniture they made. People were astounded, and they wanted to buy the furniture. So they came home, they began to publish catalogs, send them all over the United States, and people were buying furniture from Grand Rapids. If you've ever been to the Grand Rapids Public Museum, they have an amazing display in the streets of old Grand Rapids with Furniture City, where they tell the story of making furniture in Grand Rapids. Name Michigan's state fish. If you're a fisherman, maybe you know this. I really didn't realize that the brook trout is the state fish of Michigan. Name Michigan's state stone. Now I'm going to give you a hint on this because we also have a city in northwest Michigan, north of Traverse City, of the very same name. And that stone is Petoskey. You know, if you pick up a Petoskey stone along the water, it doesn't look anywhere near this beautiful, but it's after polishing it that the true colors and imprints come out. True or false? Michigan has the second longest shoreline of any state. Now stop and think, we've got 4 Great Lakes touching our state. So do we have the second largest shoreline of any state in the nation? The answer is true. We have 3,288 miles of shoreline total, okay? We have the longest freshwater shoreline, but Minnesota has 9,000 miles. Not only do they have Lake Superior, but they have like 1,000 inland lakes. But I will tell you, I have a daughter that lives in northwestern Minnesota, and a lot of the things they call lakes, I would call ponds and swamps. True or false? Michigan has more lighthouses than any other state. And keep in mind, we've got 4 Great Lakes here. Well, the answer is true. Now, at one time, we had 247 lighthouses in Michigan. Today, we have a total of 124. Now, a lot of those lighthouses, though they're still working, have been given away to nonprofit. Like in Grand Haven, the Lighthouse Conservancy owns the lighthouse. Point Betsy, there's a conservancy group that owns that. Ludington. But those lighthouses are still working lighthouses, and that light itself is cared for by the Coast Guard. Name Michigan's state bird. Now, I will tell you that this bird is one of the first birds to come back in the spring, and it's got a red belly. Little robin redbreast, the robin. Name the professional baseball team that plays at Comerica Park in downtown Detroit. Now, before this baseball team played at their own stadium, and that stadium was named after the name of the team. So who is that team that plays at Comerica Park? Indeed, it's the Detroit Tigers, but they did play at Tiger Stadium prior to that. Name the longest river in Michigan. Now, I will tell you that this river begins south of Jackson, Michigan, and comes north and across and funnels right into Lake Michigan. And that river is the Grand River, 252 miles, starts here in below Jackson, comes up through Lansing, through Grand Rapids, through Ionia, around in Lamont, and funnels right out at Grand Haven. And perhaps you've been to Grand Haven, and between the Chamber of Commerce and the old train depot is what's called a brass river, built by Grand Haven Brass. And it shows the Grand River in brass and the cities that it goes through. Michigan holds 2 state fairs. One is in the Lower Peninsula in Detroit. Where is the second state fair held? And that takes place in the Upper Peninsula. Now, I will tell you, I knew there was a state fair in the Detroit area because it was right on Woodward while I lived there. But I did not know until I moved to the Upper Peninsula that they had a UP State Fair. And that state fair is held in Escanaba. And there are carnival rides, and there's cotton candy and popcorn, and 4-H kids come to show their rabbits and their cows. It's like any county fair, but everybody is from the Upper Peninsula that comes to Escanaba for the UP State Fair. What are the names for those people who reside in the Lower Peninsula? And what is the names for those people who reside in the Upper Peninsula? Well, if you're from the UP, you know they're called Upers. Now, when I moved to the Upper Peninsula, I had no idea that people in the UP call those people who live below the bridge trolls, because where do trolls live? Under a bridge, and apple knockers. And of course, you know, we have a lot of apple orchards north of Grand Rapids. So all of us below the bridge now are known as trolls or apple knockers. Name the ship that sank in Lake Superior in November 1975. And I'll tell you, Gordon Lightfoot wrote a song about this famous ship that sank in the gales of November. And that ship was the Edmund Fitzgerald. They believe it actually broke in half when it sank in a storm. Cornish miners in the Upper Peninsula brought this meal to eat in the mines, and it's still popular today. In fact, you know, miners wore hard hats, and on their hard hat was a light so they could see in the mines. They literally used their light to heat up this meal for their lunch when they were working. And this meal is called a pasty. Now, I can tell you that in the Upper Peninsula, many people put rutabaga in it. I don't put rutabaga in mine. I put hamburger, potatoes, carrots, and onions. And today I cheat. I used to make a homemade crust, which I'm just a lousy crust maker. And now I cheat and I just buy the pie crust from the store that you unroll, and it works out just great. A lot of people put brown gravy on it. I personally like mine with ketchup. Name the person who invented the Model T. And you might remember that the Model T, another name for it, was a Tin Lizzie. And you might remember that there was only one color you could buy a Tin Lizzie in, and that was black. But who invented it? Henry Ford. And there it is. Name the record company that originated in Detroit. Berry Gordy founded it. And he recorded music by Little Stevie Wonder, the Supremes, the Four Tops, the Temptations, and the name of this company was Motown. Today, that building where Motown was located is a museum. It's the Motown Museum, or Hitsville, USA. I've not been there yet, but one of these days I'm going to go. Name the two famous cereal companies that originated in Michigan. In fact, I'll give you a hint. They're in Battle Creek, and they're still around today. You're right, Post and Kellogg. Now, Post, the first product was Postum. It was a breakfast drink. And of course, Kellogg's first product was toasted cornflakes, still made today. Name a famous soda pop made in Michigan that moms gave their kids for upset tummies. And I will tell you that when I lived in Detroit, if you go to a soda fountain and you ask them for 2 scoops of ice cream with this type of pop on it, it's called a Detroit Cooler. You know the name of this soda pop? Verner's Ginger Ale. What percentage of the Earth's fresh water come from the Great Lakes? Now keep in mind, we got 5 Great Lakes. So what's the percentage of fresh water that comes from the Great Lakes. Believe it or not, 20%. You know, that's a tremendous amount of water. And that's one of the concerns they have about the line that goes underneath the Straits of Mackinac hauling oil. Because if there was ever an oil leak, what would happen to all of our fresh water? Name the tunnel that connects Detroit, Michigan to Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Now I'll tell you there's two ways to go from Detroit to Windsor. One is over the Blue Water Bridge, but the other is through this tunnel that goes underneath the Detroit River. And the name of that tunnel is the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel. How many state parks do we have in Michigan? And you know, in Muskegon, we have the Muskegon State Park with their winter sports park and their luge run. We've got Grand Haven State Park, which is one of the busiest state parks around. You have the Holland State Park, Ludington State Park. We are just truly blessed in Michigan with state parks. We have 74 state parks with 11 state forests, a state reserve, a state wildlife area, 4 national forests, and 4 national wildlife refuges. So we are really blessed here. Name the city where the World War II submarine, the Silver Sides, is located. And I will tell you, if you go on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, they have what's called the Lost Boat Ceremony to pay tribute to those submarines lost during World War II. And on that particular day, you can go aboard the Silver Sides for free. And they also start the engines. So where is the Silver Sides located? Muskegon sits right along the channel. Name a river that hosts a canoe race with more than 90 canoes participating. And I will tell you that I grew up in northeastern Michigan. And this famous canoe race took place about 13 miles north of where I lived. But you have canoeists who come from all over the world to participate in the AuSable River canoe race. Name the person who leads the Mackinac Bridge Walk on Labor Day. Now this year we didn't have a Mackinac Bridge Walk because of COVID, but generally, who is the person that leads that walk? And it is the governor of Michigan, and that's Governor Snyder right there with Lieutenant Governor Kelly by his side, walking the Mackinac Bridge. Name the movie that was filmed on Mackinac Island that starred the actor Christopher Reeves. And in fact, I'll tell you, if you go in the fall, they actually have a weekend that they show the movie, they talk about what took place, where the filming was taking place. But the name of the movie is Somewhere in Time. Name the Academy Award movie that was filmed in Big Bay, Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. In fact, the story is true. It really did take place. And the man that wrote the book is the same name as the movie, was an Upper Peninsula lawyer and actually a very famous fly fisherman. Not only did he write the book that this movie is made from, but he wrote a number of books about fly fishing. And the name of this movie was Anatomy of a Murder, and the murder took place in the Lumberjack Tavern, which is still there today in Big Bay. Grand Rapids has built new hospitals and clinics, and they're all located in close proximity. In fact, Michigan State has built a college of medicine there. What is the name for this area where these hospitals and clinics are located? And believe it or not, the name is the Medical Mile. Name the university where their football stadium is called the Big House. And I'll give you a hint because the name of their teams are the Wolverines. And yes, indeed, it's the University of Michigan. And as you can see, this photo was taken prior to COVID. We would never have had this many people sitting together today. This Detroit-born actor went on to star in the TV show Make Room for Daddy, but he also started St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Now, as an upcoming actor, he had a wife who was going to have a baby, and he just wasn't sure, do I keep trying to get recognized? Do I give up? And he prayed to God and said, you know, if I make it as an actor, I am going to do something special. Well, that something special was St. Jude's Children's Hospital. You've probably seen ads for it. Today, his daughter, Marlo, heads it up. And children with disabilities, no child is ever turned down. No families are ever charged for any of the medical care that they receive. So who is this Detroit-born actor that started St. Jude's Hospital? Danny Thomas. My mother-in-law said she dated him once. She met him and went on a date with him. He was the governor of Massachusetts. Today, he's a senator for Utah. His dad was a former governor of Michigan, and I'll tell you, he's a Republican. Do you know who this man was, whose dad was the governor of Michigan? Mitt Romney. Kind of looks like his dad, George. This famous pilot was born in Detroit and was the very first person to fly solo across the ocean. You also may remember him because he and his wife lived in New Jersey. Someone came into their home and stole their little boy, who was a toddler, and later this little boy was found dead. The name of this pilot, who was born in Detroit, Charles Lindbergh. This auto inventor worked for the Ford Motor Company until he designed his own car that was made of stainless steel. In fact, this car really became famous in a movie called Back to the Future. And that is a DeLorean. John DeLorean built that car. Of course, stainless steel doesn't rust, right? This televangelist was born in Muskegon. Unfortunately, he went to prison for fraud and conspiracy. And you may remember because he had a wife, Tammy Faye, who wore an awful lot of makeup. And that televangelist was Jim Bakker, and there's Tammy Faye right next to him. This Muskegon-born actor starred in the TV shows Dragnet and MASH. And it's Harry Morgan. You might remember him in Dragnet, and then again on MASH as Colonel Potter. A statue of this famous boxer's fist is located in downtown Detroit. I'll tell you that this particular gentleman was in the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, during the Depression, where he was an amateur boxer. They boxed and went on to become very famous. And this famous boxer is Joe Louis, and there's a statue of his fist. This Detroit-born comedian, who's a woman, starred in Saturday Night Live. But upon her death, her husband, Gene Wilder, began to build houses that aided those people with cancer. It was a place where you could go and go to a support group, have a meal, meet other people who are going through the exact same thing that you were. And the name of this Detroit-born comedian was Gilda Radner. Before the Upper Peninsula became a part of the state of Michigan, it was part of another state. Can you guess what state? And I know you might be thinking, well, Wisconsin's right next to us, Illinois is right next to us, but believe it or not, Ohio, the Upper Peninsula was part of Ohio, and they traded, and we got the UP. So the question is, are we Michiganders or are we Michiganians? Well, Michigander, sometimes we're called Wolverines. I told you if you're a Yooper, you live in the UP. If you're a Troll, you live in the Lower Peninsula. They might call you a Michigoose if you're a woman, and a Michigander if you're a man. But it doesn't matter what we're called, because it's great to be from the state of Michigan. Thanks for letting me come to see you, and I'll see you again soon.